This time, in honour of Burns Night, we look at motorcycle manufacturers that have a Scottish influence. This weekend, our friends north of the border, that's Scotland, are celebrating Burns Night. So this time I thought we'd take a look at the Scottish contribution to the motorcycle industry. And while there have been some truly awesome Scots riders, from Guthrie to Hislop and so on, and Scotland has been the site of some pretty heavy industries, surprisingly few of the companies actually branched out into motorcycle construction. But there were a few, and the impact of Scots, and indeed people of Scots descent, on the industry is a big one. But first, if we're talking about the Scots' influence on the motorcycle industry, why am I riding a cheap East German two-stroke motorcycle in the beginning? Well, because while MZ is most assuredly a German company, the concept behind its two-stroke engine most definitely is not. Well, because history tells us that the first commercially available and effective two-stroke engine was the work of a Scots engineer. And this was one Dugald Clark. He patented his engine design in 1881. And indeed the unit was commercially available, but of course was not fitted to a motorcycle because they hadn't invented them yet. Although in fact Clark's engine was slightly different to the engines we're more used to, as it didn't use the crankcase as a charging pump below the cylinder. Instead, a separate charging cylinder was used to force the charge into the combustion chamber. But it was alas an Englishman, Joseph Day, who pioneered the use of crankcase scavenging. However, it was Yorkshireman, although most definitely of Scottish descent, Alfred Angus Scott, who produced the first real practical two-stroke to be employed in a motorcycle. But we'll get to him a little bit later. Now, William Beardmore and Company was a huge engineering conglomerate, producing ships on the Clyde, and in its peak employing around 40,000 men in and around Glasgow. The company had been founded by William Beardmore. Incidentally, the Beardmore Glacier is named after him. And his company's interests were wide and varied. As well as producing ships, they also got involved in the production of engines and power units, guns and railway locomotives. And so we move to F.E. Baker. F.E. Baker owned Precision Engineering as a manufacturer of motorcycle power units of various types. In 1919 he entered into agreement with William Beardmore and Company to produce complete motorcycles. Beardmore, of course, having his large engineering facilities upon the Clyde. But the range would soon expand, encompassing 250 to 600cc units of both 2 and 4 stroke. But alas, the venture was short-lived, only lasting until 1924. For his part, Baker would regain the Precision name, producing a range of small capacity machines down in Birmingham. That is until 1930, when the company was taken over by the James Cycle Company. Another much smaller venture was AJR Motorcycles. This was set up by A.J. Roberts in Edinburgh, and was predominantly known for its 350 and 500cc competition machines used in both on and off-road events. But they did produce a few sporting road models, but would only do so between 1925 and 1926. The company itself will continue to produce off-road and racing models through until the end of the 1930s. And while Alfred Angus Scott was most certainly a Yorkshireman, he was definitely also of Scottish descent. And while being born in Bradford in 1875, his family did move to Scotland when he was young, and he went to school in Melrose near Selkirk. Incidentally, he would later go to school in Uttoxeter in Staffordshire. See, I knew I'd find a way of fitting my home county in here somehow. In 1897, Angus hand-built his first two-stroke engine, and was by 1908 a manufacturer of motorcycles in his own right. And there's no doubt Scott was a mercurial genius, introducing as he did the Kickstarter, the two-stroke liquid-cooled parallel twin engine with automatic oiling, and for his competition machines he even used rotary valve induction too. And let's not forget the telescopic fork and his experimentation with rear suspension units. By 1915 Scott had turned his attention to a bizarre freewheeling contraption called the Scott Sociable, but unfortunately Scott's premature death in 1923 would bring an end to the project. The Douglas family were based around Kelso in Lanarkshire, However, in the late 19th century, the family took the decision to move south, settling in the south of England in a place called Kingswood near Bristol. And here in 1882, two brothers, William and Edwin, would set themselves up as blacksmiths before branching out into foundry work soon afterwards. And one of their customers was Joseph Barter. He produced a small lightweight flat twin engine for use in motorcycles. The machine was known as the Fee and later changed to the more anglicised Fairy. But when the company went bankrupt in 1907, the Douglas brothers swept in and took over. They enlarged Barter's fore and aft flat twin engine out to 350cc and rechristened the motorcycle understandably the Douglas. And as a nod to the heritage, they even decorated some fuel tanks with a tartan pattern. The Douglas flat twin offered excellent performance for the day and was very popular initially, with a number of machines being sold to the military during the Great War. The company was also heavily involved in competition, claiming their first TT win in 1912 in the lightweight class. But like Scott, the machines would also prove very popular in trials in the early years, and the flat twin even proved effective in the early days of Speedway. Throughout their history, Douglas built almost exclusively flat twin machines. These were usually of 350cc, although some larger models were available, and usually, at least in the early days, the engine was laid out fore and aft, with one cylinder pointing forward and the other pointing backwards towards the wheel. And it was until 1934 and the Endeavour model that they produced their first machine in a more conventional engine orientation, well to our modern eyes at least, in the BMW style with a cylinder sticking out either side. The Endeavour's engine was a side valve of 494cc and even featured shaft drive. Post-war would see a new range of 350cc flat twins. While these would in some ways resemble the Endeavour, they were very different, featuring chain pile drive instead of the shaft of the Endeavour and using overhead valves. The range included both touring and sports models, and the performance of the sports models was very respectable for the time. But unfortunately, Douglas struggled in the post-war climate, with a rather small company lacking capital. The company, however, would rumble on, would finally end in 1957, by which time they were producing Vespa scooters under licence. Whatever bikes or collections of bikes would you like to see us cover in a future video? Maybe you got a bike we can use for a test ride. Either way, get in touch below. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course, thank you very much for watching.